we as a company consider ourselves an AI and automation company. Eventually, we will be doing this for other use cases throughout the IT world.
Hello, and welcome to Fireside with VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and today we are with Josh Aaron, who is the founder and CEO of Aiden. Aiden, full disclosure, is one of our portfolio companies we're super excited to be investing in, and we're going to jump into what they do. You may notice the first two letters of Aiden are AI, but who isn't right now? And we're going to talk about Aiden and what they're doing, but I also want to end the episode talking a little bit about how Josh raised his funding rounds, which I think was like some actionable things that other people could follow and learn from and be more successful at. So, Josh, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thanks for being part of our journey, too.
Awesome. So, the space you're in, I had started Pencom Systems Administration in the beginning of my career, and we were right in the beginning and invested a couple times into Alex Moore's Node Prime, which was ex-Palantir, all Palantir guys, and he's now with Joe Lonsdale. Like me, moved from Silicon Valley to Austin. In fact, I meant to say too, we're super excited to be in your company too, because you're our second investment in Dallas. So we're pumped to be able to, find great companies, here in Texas as well, not just, New York and the Valley, where our old offices were. But why don't we start off and tell us, what is Aiden? What do you guys do? And which are the customers you're focused on? Like, who should care the most about what you're doing?
Sure. Thank you. Aiden stands for Artificial Intelligence for Desktops and Enterprise Networks. What we're doing is modern software deployment and endpoint management. It's everything from building machines and setting them up to out of the gate, and whether they're from bare metal or virtual, to updating them the entire time in the wild, meaning patching them, adding software, removing software. But we build them into what we call desired state configuration, which for our customers means they have all the software they're supposed to have and none of the software they're not supposed to have at all times.
Okay. So, maybe take a step back and talk about the evolution of the industry. It's when I started my career, you had like Wall Street, for example, like Goldman Sachs and everybody was on a COBOL dumb, or no, they were on like a big mainframe. So very centralized. And we had dumb server architecture. So like the computer screen on the trader's desk, you see a guy with a baseball bat smashing his terminal because he had a bad day, right? And everyone's like, don't worry. It's all on the mainframe. And then we went to client server architecture. We had mobility with laptops, and, companies have to support this, right? And then we've kind of gone to cloud, whereas if you forget your laptop on an airplane or whatever, it's kind of no big deal because everything's sort of centralized in the cloud again. So we're kind of coming full circle, but that's very simplistic compared to the value that you're bringing and what you guys are doing. Maybe walk us through the evolution of the network and like why Aiden is so important for setting up and managing these networks, and they're getting more and more heterogeneous.
Yeah, I came into the industry around the time that mainframes were just starting to phase out. I worked at Credit Suisse First Boston on a major project to integrate, their entire data centers from the two companies into one, the largest trading floors in Manhattan. We still had mainframes in those days, but a lot of stuff had moved to client server and distributed architecture. Bandwidth had a lot to do with that too, right? Because if you needed everything connected physically with wires or fiber, or whatever you have, it was really hard to bifurcate things. But then, of course, we got into distributed systems. We went really whole hog towards client server as an industry in IT. That's right. Everybody thought the future forever was going to be, servers with fat clients, if you will, right? We call fat client, right? And then we got more bandwidth and everybody's like, well, wait a minute. This decentralization is really, really tough to manage, right? Extremely difficult. Software was kind of outpacing the computer architecture itself at the endpoint. And so all of the various programs running were creating, if you remember in those days, we don't really have this anymore, but DLL conflicts and things like Microsoft Windows, where applications were essentially crashing into each other on the desktop. So then we started to go back to an idea of, well, let's go either private cloud or fully public cloud, and everything will be thin clients again, right? Now we're calling that modern desktop or Windows AVDs, things like that, right? Thin clients and
Thin
virtual
client
machines.
was in everybody's, that you didn't make a sentence without saying thin client.
I was in the MSP industry for a long time, and with the MSPs, we never did it. We kind of believed that public cloud would be the way, and then people would go back to the way we see it now, which I'll talk about. But a lot of the MSPs went to hosting their own virtual desktops for companies. And that reduces speed and flexibility and things like that at times, and it frustrates people when you need changes made to a common infrastructure for everybody.
Yeah.
So the idea of desktop hosting kind of quickly got challenged, and then we saw a lot of companies, particularly enterprise companies, wanting to have more flexibility, going back to having full clients again. We've even had conversations over the last 2 years with major Fortune 100s. We're talking hundreds of thousands of endpoints in these companies where they made a huge investment in public cloud infrastructure and having a lot of thin clients, virtual desktop, that are now giving people full laptops again. But they're finding challenges, and that's really where we come in. We are trying to make it easy to manage those challenges, make it simple to get your software working properly at the endpoint, and still have a robust endpoint where you mentioned being on a plane. Our clients are frustrated with the fact that if they're in thin clients, they've got sometimes dozens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that can't work while they're being fully mobile. We all
Right.
still know that airplane Wi-Fi isn't what it should be, right?
Yeah, and that's a big change agent was, and people forget that Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Novell before Google, when Novell was running the world. But another change agent was the speed of the edge of the fixed and mobile networks, right? So the bandwidth speeds up and down, we're changing, and so mobility, comes into play. But what percentage of the business community is on Microsoft compared to Apple? I think that a lot of VCs live in their echo chamber bubble, and I switched to Mac a long time ago. That we forget what the actual numbers are. So, what percentage of business in the United States, the world, is Microsoft?
Yeah, our research shows it's over 85% and growing again.
Okay, I thought it was 87, but maybe that was like when we first met a long time ago. So 85% of
87 is what some people have said. Some people said as much as 90 now. Microsoft does not publish these numbers. So you can't go to Microsoft and say, exactly how many Windows endpoints are out there. And plus, there's the issue of how many are commercially licensed and how many unlicensed copies of Windows may be running out there.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna be in Redmond at the headquarters next week, so I'll ask around. But point is, it doesn't really matter though. The key thing is we're talking over 80%, and so you guys are 100% Microsoft, right? So that's where you play. Okay.
Yeah,
and so what's the
to be for 100% Microsoft solution now, but we also designed our software in C# because that's all portable in .NET to the Mac environment if we ever want to go there. But what we're finding is that there is so much demand for what we're doing in the Windows world with application packaging, software distribution, really getting this stuff right, and vulnerability management on the Windows endpoint, that there isn't a whole lot of really emphasis in getting to the Mac anytime soon. Okay. So that's not something in our near term.
Maybe when we do the next funding round, we talk about that to figure out what our capital requirements are and who's really ready to pay. So who's ready to pay? What is the profile? Like, how big of a company? How many employees? How distributed do they look like? What do they look like? Like, what's a range of what's your smallest customer? What's your biggest customer, like by employees or endpoints or however you want to measure?
Yeah, our smallest customer is a little under 500 endpoints, and our largest customer is going to be closer to 20,000. We are playing in the mid-market enterprise space right now. A lot of financial companies, a couple law firms, some life sciences companies, but we have had several very interesting POCs and conversations with large Fortune 100 enterprise that are interested in what we're doing. We're up and coming, and they're watching us very closely, and we're having great meetings there. So we do think this is a up and to the right kind of market where the appetite is in those companies, but they want to see more validation of the technology at this point. in the mid-market enterprise.
Sometimes I think as a venture capitalist, before completing an investment, I ask myself, would I want to quit my job and do sales for this company? And it's an interesting, sobering question, because sometimes you just get like caught up in the other guys that have high conviction for it. And like you're in a deal that if you actually ask yourself that question, you're like, this is a real nice to have. I don't know if I want to be selling this in a headwind marketplace. But when you think about the value prop from like a sales selling perspective, you guys are doing a number of things, right? I mean, there's the evolution of it used to be one person managed 40 Unix workstations, and then they get a little smarter, and now one guy is managing 200 boxes, 400 boxes, 1,000 boxes. So that's been a little bit of the evolution of humankind, as to one, how many people does it take to manage this many like servers and endpoints, boxes, right? You guys are making setup easier. You're making ongoing administration, network administration, systems administration easier. You're able to figure out how to like read, write, automate, like a lot of things starts happening there, but you're also able to like avoid disaster, right? So there, maybe talk like a little bit about disaster, maybe go through these selling points of like, why is it better to spend money on Aiden than to not be on Aiden? Because if you have one disaster, what does that cost? So how do you think about, the selling points kind of?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, on the front end, we're reducing vulnerability, so we're reducing risk. Like having all your software up to date as often as possible, as much as it can be, and in compliance with company standards, we've really reduced the upfront risk. On our watch to date, we have never seen a customer get hit with any kind of ransomware or anything while we're playing. We have seen a couple of customers come to us in an emergency where they've said, "We've been hit, confidentially. Can you come in and wipe and rebuild all our computers very, very quickly?"
Okay.
And in a couple of cases, and I think there's even a case study on our website now about this, we were able to reduce their time from an estimated, possibly 3 to 5 months to just a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to get their entire enterprise back up and running on all new endpoints. So if they had been a customer, Andrew, we could have done that in a day, half a day. Because once the policies are in place, the software libraries in place, the repositories are set up, you can pretty much click a button and wipe and rebuild any endpoint. So we are an absolute mitigation to any kind of ransomware event or attack or any other cyber event that hits the software side of the endpoint. But we do think that's getting more and more something that will be a selling feature in the future, in that we have companies that are so concerned about it, they're talking about it with us in sales calls. But the main thing has been vulnerability management, and not just vulnerability management, really productivity for the end user. Because when everything's up to date and working properly, the digital employee experience is better. People are more productive. They're not calling the help desk all the time, and they're happier with IT in general. Plus, we're automating so much work that we're reducing cost across the organization operationally for them to maintain computers.
Yeah. I mean, we've been saying for years, our primary passion area investment thesis is startups that are automating human workflows and leveraging data. And we get pulled into all kinds of things, but it almost feels like, why would you invest in a company that's not doing that right now? And so when another thought is, drilling down to, is this a good sale? Like, is this company going to scale up and get customers in up or down, good or bad markets? Does it cost, how much does it cost to do this without, company X, the startup? And can they, how many people does it take to do this, at any remote like level to what the startup is delivering for them? And are they selling that software for notably less than what it costs them to do it? And then give them, say, we're going to stay focused on this. So, you're going to be best of class. Have you come up with any almost like practically discounted cash flows of how much you're able to save a company on what it takes to do this, with a wrench in a spreadsheet?
Yeah, we are actually in the middle of working on our first major ROI calculator from the data, and I don't have all those figures yet, but I can tell you we've already seen things like one of our application packaging engineers using Aiden's technology on our team, the Aiden Labs team, is able to produce the same output as 16 to 20 packaging engineers at the enterprise level. We've measured this now in 3 Fortune 100 POCs. So we've really seen that kind of result. We also believe that in our product roadmap, the things we're doing to scale, we're going to get to the point where one of our enterprise packaging engineers for application packaging can do the work of 1,000 to 2,000 engineers without our technology.
Okay.
That's the lever we expect to have within a year or so, because of some of the innovation.
So you're saying you can automate to perfection, more real-time, continuous, programmatic compliance of 1,000 humans.
Yeah, we're applying a DevOps methodology to work that's traditionally been done by humans and basically generating what to lay people looks like code, right? Validation scripts, targeting logic, application deployment sequences, all that stuff looks like code. We're generating that code effectively, right? So from plain English policy files. And we're doing it with higher efficacy and better results. Our packages land with more efficacy. So we're not just getting the work done, we're getting it done better than humans to do it in the past.
And that's our path as a venture firm, and it's the path that we're on. At some point, the locomotive train is faster than the horse, and like the software can read 1,000 documents perfectly and immediately, and programmatically start to automate if this then that, and so it just gets better. So I kind of think we need an Aiden for every single industry, and you're doing the IT important 80+% of business that they have to have this. And it's interesting that it takes you to do it and not Redmond, Microsoft to do all this, but you're getting a critical mass of your footprint. I know you guys have some of your own webinars and stuff where you talk about there's been a paradigm shift in the IT industry. What is the paradigm shift that you see being so in the trenches here, and how have you mapped Aiden to, be part of that shift?
Well, when I talk about the security IT paradigm shift, really talking about the fact that the CISO and the CTO need to be aligned and on the same page, which doesn't just mean talk. Talk is cheap. Like, we all need to be more secure. We all need to have faster results on things and all this, but it needs to be incentivized that way. And when you really look at the way that leaders in IT have been incentivized for years, the CISO and IT security community is incentivized to lock things down, put in rigorous controls, compensating controls, keep things really tight on the security framework side. The IT community, CTO, VP of infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, they're always challenged to do more with less, provide more flexibility, provide more speed, get applications deployed faster. They're rewarded for getting things done, for getting projects and completed and having end user support requests answered extremely fast. Anytime you have speed, it's really hard to maintain security, right? So these two things are obviously, and have been for a long time, talked about in conflict with each other. What Aiden is working on and what we're doing is so important, because we're not just creating an ability to get this stuff done easier and cheaper and better with our automation. We're creating one common language through the natural language processing aspect and the plain English policy files that can be read by CISOs, can be read by IT leaders. We're creating visibility through Aiden Vision, where in one pane of glass, they can see not only what's been done, but what's going to be done and when it will be done by our bot, and all of the updates that are happening. And they can see how that compares to vulnerabilities and reduces vulnerabilities throughout the environment. So we're creating kind of one pane of glass that brings these two worlds closer together in concert with one another, working on the same goals and the same outcomes for their organization to the betterment of the entire company. That's what we're really doing.
So this is part of a timeless evolution of the state of humanity, of like business intelligence. You're the CEO of Shell Corporation. How can you see what's going on across your empire? That these kind of dashboards that in an automated manner are grabbing information and able to spoon feed it up to the C-suite, even if they're kind of different sides of the organization. Okay, and you're talking about like chatbots and all that. Before GPT, a lot of people kind of didn't understand what was already happening across technology world, but now everybody knows. And you know, people write a love poem to your wife, and it's like, whoa, this is pretty interesting stuff. What do you think about that entire industry, and not only OpenAI and Sam Altman, but you know, how is that impacting the industry? How are you guys leveraging, you know, this sort of technology? I mean, you've kind of been quietly building it, I think, for years without people maybe talking about it or thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly AI and large language models are here to stay. They're in their infancy, but they're here to stay. They're not any kind of fad. You know, you hear all these things on the internet. They're happening. But it's all about decision support at this point, right? It's about, you think about ChatGPT. I use it sometimes. How do people use it? Use it maybe to write a letter that you didn't feel like you had a lot of time to write. Get your first draft, and then you edit it and you work from there. And there may be things you like about the response and things that you don't.
Right.
Those are all fine when you're on the other end of the computer and as a human, and you can work on it, use it, manipulate it, and tailor it to your own needs. But in the world of IT infrastructure, you can't be wrong. Like, I can ask ChatGPT a question or some other AI program and large language model a question, and might get 3 of the wrong answers the first time. I can keep giving it more prompts until I get what I want.
Right.
In infrastructure, we can't build a server wrong, we can't build a computer wrong, we can't patch it wrong, or we're taking people down, we're creating disruption, we're creating cost, and we're possibly creating big vulnerabilities and security holes, right? So our version of natural language processing is really structured natural language processing, and it's designed to be right every single time in every single use case. And that is one of the things that Aiden is having to prove, quite frankly, Andrew. And I think you and I have talked about this before. It's trust and confidence. We have 4 of the top 5 private equity firms in the world using this product, and they wouldn't use it. They can afford any technology on the planet, right? They're using it because they trust it. But Aiden's biggest challenge as we're growing is convincing more and more people to trust the technology to do this work, because it is very, very tedious work that has to be accurate every time. And that's really something I feel the most proud about that we've accomplished. But again, in our infancy, right? We're doing that for one use case really, really well. We as a company consider ourselves an AI and automation company. Eventually, we will be doing this for other use cases throughout the IT world.
Okay.
That's where this gets incredibly powerful. That's where some of our big advisors got interested, our co-lead investors got interested, and so did the people from Microsoft. We have a Microsoft principal on the advisory. So, you know, these are things that we're doing that we're really excited about in the future. It's not Terminator, it's not taking over the world, but it is a computer building other computers better than a human can do it every time.
Yeah. All right. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense. And what about working with Microsoft? I mean, Microsoft has, but like I got to know their corporate venture team really, really well, and I wrote a book on that. And so they just seem so different than other people. Like when you are, you know, selling more records than the Beatles and the money is just flowing in, you behave differently. They can be like more supportive than some other companies that are like, hey, cut to where I make money. Have you had a good experience, or how are you working with Microsoft in general? And what's that partnership been like?
Sure. I mean, it's also early in the partnership, but it's been a good one. We're in Microsoft for Startups. You may have heard of that. We were
Yeah,
in it.
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, and they've increased their support to us. They've increased people on our account that are working with us. Those people from Microsoft for Startups not only gave us some sponsorship dollars in building our backend infrastructure through Azure, but we also were able to get access to thought leaders in the organization in several occasions. We're part of something called ISV Fast Track, and we just became co-sell ready in the Microsoft commercial marketplace. So now companies can use their MAC, their spend commitments with Microsoft to purchase Aiden, which is great, and that's just getting going. The other thing that's gone on is we've been part of Azure Fast Track. And by being part of Azure Fast Track, you get to not only have support of engineers at Microsoft when you have questions and problems, but you also get the ear of people that can make change and make, you know, Microsoft is a Titanic, let's face it, right? You don't turn the Titanic on the dime. We just released a feature this week about how we're now using AZ Copy. It's an Azure feature to sync our software repositories. And a year ago, we looked at it, we wanted to do it, we couldn't do it because of some limitations in AZ copy. But by being part of Azure Fast Track, we're able to present our case, explain to them the things that are needed to make this work better for some of their customers, and for, obviously it suits our purpose for our product, but it also
Yeah.
suits a lot of other needs with AZ copy across their enterprise customers. And they told us that because of our influence, that made this a higher priority on their product roadmap for that product. It got done, and now we can release all of our software repositories syncing on AZ copy instead of open source sync tools that we were using before, to be in a more, compelling Azure infrastructure, cohesive environment for our customers. And it's a faster, easier onboarding, works with a bunch of other Microsoft tools. So they're already familiar with it, easy to set up. Those kinds of things have been happening. And I would say the relationship keeps getting better and better. But like any other startup, we're always vying to get more attention from Microsoft. We'd like them to look at what we're doing more. We have lots of other ideas to share with them. So
Sure.
your investment connections, we're always happy to talk to more folks and convince more folks that this really matters to our customers. And ultimately, those are their customers.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing you can impact functional requirements of a company of that size. But I suppose they're lucky to have you shown them, ideas. Obviously, they wouldn't have done it if they didn't understand what you were talking about. So I think a lot of companies that do have like cyber attacks and breaches of security and downtime, they don't want to be on the front page, the Financial Times with that. And cyber attacks from like a country level to a criminal level are maybe bigger than anybody wants anybody to know about. Whereas you kind of see some stuff. Is there anything like redacting names you can explain like the severity and like urgency of it? Because I think, like Citibank loses $300 million. They don't mention that, like they don't talk about that. How bad is the state of cybersecurity, from, the black hats coming in?
Well, it's dangerous landscape in this country right now. I'll put it that way. Because we're in these conversations all the time, and without mentioning any names, our prospects, even not just our customers, will share with us what their vulnerability landscape looks like. It's not uncommon to see vulnerabilities in the many tens of thousands, sometimes even over 100,000 vulnerabilities just across the Windows enterprise. Forget about the network infrastructure and other places. And that may sound like a daunting or sort of insurmountable, scary number to people. But we've seen our customers reduce those vulnerabilities by 97% by running our technology and doing some smart things. So it's not good. It's certainly not good. And certainly we hear about breaches. I mean, there's a major auto manufacturer that we know of that had a $400 million breach last year, and that's not public knowledge, right?
Wow.
There are things like that. I'm sure you hear it in the investment community elsewhere. There's always only going to be a very small percentage of reported breaches.
Right.
Even though there's regulatory and compliance coming down from CISA and the federal government to do more about it, which I think is great, I still think you're going to have companies weighing the risk reward of, do we go public with this or not? What's the risk if we don't? Maybe we should just be quiet about it. They also don't want to invite more opportunity for hacking and more opportunity for black hat people to come in by letting people know that they've got a weakness. So I understand it from both sides. But it is very interesting how many vulnerabilities we are aware of across companies that we see on the sales process side of things.
Sure. Yeah. I just wanted to hear your perspective because it's worse than it would appear, I would imagine, for the nature of, you don't want to divulge too much on that when you're running these companies. Let's pivot a little bit about what it's been like running a startup in this moment in history. Like, it wasn't that long ago in 2021 that everyone was getting funded for larger cash amounts than they normally would have raised. They were raising at bigger valuations than they normally would have had. It was just like a weird, wonky year, 2021. So if you have an existing customer, like an existing logo customer, they're adding seats, they're hiring, like even Facebook hiring like crazy, everybody hiring like crazy. We have zero unemployment and all that. And then all of a sudden there's a hiring freeze. There is, let's get rid of 10% of the worst people at this company without a lawyer. like triple protected minority gets fired, where normally that's just too hairy to touch. So the number of seats were kind of, stopping or going down. So rather than just ride your revenue up as a venture-backed startup, you were, maybe even losing ground on existing logos, and then getting new logos at headwinds of, rather than, oh my God, we've been talking about this last week. Can you come in here tomorrow? How quickly can you be here in Boston to meet us? Whereas maybe now it's like, hey, let's meet in late September. So like maybe talk about the headwinds, the sales cycle. Like I'm kind of thinking about the sales cycle specifically, and what that's been like the last year or two.
Yeah, I would say, if you really look back a little over a year ago, right? We're talking like maybe March through May of 2022.
So that was like the Putin invasion, the crash of the stock market, really, right?
Well, the earth suddenly shifted, right? And we saw that stuff coming. We saw sales cycles starting to really slow down. Things like the Sequoia memo coming out, talking about, the waterfall of money into startups slowing down, all of that, right? But I will tell you, one of the things I'm most proud of, we saw that early at Aiden anyway, and we really reacted to it early. We've grown a little slower. We've been incredibly capital efficient. We had to extend our runway between rounds by almost a year, almost a full year from when we thought we might raise. We raised an early round of money on safe notes, and not a price round, but just safe notes into
Was
the
that
company.
was that the Jeff Pomerantz Right Side Capital Management round, or was that before those guys?
Yeah, those guys were involved. They were the largest investor in the first round. They are now one of our co-lead investors as you know, in
And
this
did
first
they
round.
invested on a safe?
Yes, they invested on a safe the first time. Yes.
Interesting, because I mean, I helped raise some money for those guys, and we used to be right around the corner from each other in San Francisco, and so I know Jeff really, really well. I have to say that they hired that John Eng guy who does a really good job of introducing, like I hear from them like every week, because their portfolio is like 1,600 companies or something. So
Yeah.
they're doing a good job of raising money. Like they know when to show us a deal. Like they know our model.
Well, and that was part of our strategy in bringing them on as an early investor.
Yeah.
Actually, David Lambert over there, who's their COO and one of the partners, and when I saw their model and the number of portfolio companies they're involved in, the number of other other investors and LPs and things like that that they deal with, they have such a wide net they can cast to help you. So in that way, they've been incredibly helpful. David's also a great board member, but they really were part of the thinking in the early days that they would be a good way to do this. And, they gave us credibility early on that allowed us to bring in a lot of other interesting investors into the company, people that were part of that initial raise on safes. And then they helped us with securing the next round and the co-lead and all of that. And they've been a great partner all the way through. But I will say that being capital efficient and to get back to your first question, and being careful, we have zero churn. We've never lost one customer at Aiden since inception.
Really?
And so, like you were saying, that a lot of startups, they had a bit of losing some of their early customers and having to go back. And of course, we've heard that story. We've done just an exceptional job with an 89 net promoter score. The last 6 months, we've gotten nothing but tens from all of our customers. We're constantly measuring that and looking at it and meeting with customers, getting feedback from customer user groups. And by that, I mean the IT decision makers and IT security leaders in those companies. And so that's been a big part of this, not growing so fast that we outpace what we can service, right? Not trying to go too fast and not be able to deliver on the promises and the experience that we promise to those customers.
Got it. And I referenced I like the way you raised your rounds. I remember you drove down from Dallas to Austin and you showed up at my ugly holiday sweater party, met everybody wearing a good ugly sweater. And then I guess we started talking a lot for a while, and then we're just happy to be in that round with Blue and Right Side Capital. And I guess you call that a seed round. I mean, it was $4.5 million round, right? I mean, I almost think of that as like, that used to be like a Series A, but I guess seeds are getting bigger and Series A's are getting bigger. So what's next for Aiden? Or you don't have to answer that question if you don't want, but I guess you were talking about you could potentially add in Mac for clients that, really need it. But what do you see as the next evolution? for the company?
That's a great question. I would say that our next evolution, Andrew, is really about vulnerability management, IT security. What Aiden does for our customers is an IT operational efficiency, has a direct security benefit. But we're not doing as much as I want to be doing in the future to really make it visible, things like how many vulnerabilities we reduce. Or I'd like to be able to do things like, imagine being able to control by plain English policy what applications or what parts of the infrastructure get upgraded and when, based on things like CVSS threshold scores, right? What if you could say, for example, in your finance organization, in a large bank, or in a particular group, I want any accounting software that has a CVSS threshold and CVE that's higher than 7, for example, or 8, to be updated, patched, or rolled back to a safe version within 84 hours, just as like pick an example, right? And then you could get alerts along the way that you're getting very, very close to your own compliance thresholds, right? Aiden is already doing all of this. We're now going to be bringing in the data to be able to report on it as it pertains to security and vulnerability management very directly, and to set policies based on that very directly,
Right.
and have Spock go out and do things in an autonomous fashion, or at least let you know you're in danger of compromising your own policies.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about reading information, about writing changes, and then about building an intelligence of if this, then that, which is kind of automation. And it's got to be served up in a dashboard that people can understand. And then they interact with that dashboard. And that's part of that journey of like one sysadmin, one network administrator dealing with, 50,000 endpoints as opposed to 40. And then for the high level people to understand, set policies and all that. So it's like an inevitable thing. It's amazing that it'll be happening after our lifespans expire, and it's like it just doesn't happen overnight. To write it, I guess things are constantly changing. Up, down, right, left, right, everywhere. So it just has to be software.
Well, and the other thing you just said, it's the dashboard view, right? In IT, people always say, those are the IT guys. I don't know what they're working on. And even when I go over and look at their dashboards, if I'm a board member, somebody that's in the executive team, I often don't know what that stuff means. Aiden's really focused on making visibility of data in dashboards that can be understood by your constituents, by your board, by anyone that can read plain English. Yeah. Not making it too complicated where only a highly skilled person in IT can look at it and understand what the implications are.
Yeah. Well, it's great. Well, I'm happy to see that the company is in just total sales execution right now. I know you're off to Orlando, so you're going to escape the Texas heat in exchange for probably not as hot over there right now. But that's awesome. I'll be up in Seattle next week. If people want to get a hold of you, the website is www.meetaiden.com, right?
Yes.
So meet Aiden. And I'm sure, even if you're not fundraising, it's good to hear from an investor that understands the space that might be able to add value. What's the best way for people to reach you? And I can stick it in the show notes, of course.
Yeah, the best way for people to reach me is on my LinkedIn. Direct message me there. I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn to just about anybody who wants to reach out. Happy to do that. They can contact us at the company. Certainly, sales@meetaiden.com or info@meetaiden.com. If they want to reach me directly, they're welcome to go through LinkedIn or send me a direct email. That's fine. josh.aaron@meetaiden.com is fine. Whatever somebody wants to do to reach us. We are evangelists of our own story. We want to be out there talking to people. And every time we have a conversation, we gain new interest. I have one of the pleasures of this company is in 3.5 years, I've never had a conversation that someone said, you know what, that's not interesting. I don't want to have a follow-up. Everybody wants to know more. So please reach out directly.
All right, my man. All right. Well, great to see you and hope to catch up soon. Send me whatever you want me to put in the show notes so people can figure out how to reach you there.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Right. Okay. Bye for now.